How do you lead yourself first? That's a great question, and I'm so glad that you've asked it. Hi, my name is Rob Nieves with Skilled Pastor, where we offer practical advice for better ministry. If you find value in this video, would you do us a favor and just click the like and subscribe along with the bell notification so that you don't miss any one of our videos. Now, let's dive into this question. I think it's a very important question. We often find ourselves that it's easier to lead others, but to lead ourselves becomes a little bit of a challenge, right? It's easier to say, hey, you do this, you do that, and to delegate responsibilities left and right. But sometimes really leading ourselves becomes a little bit of a challenge. So today I want to ask, why is that? Why is it that we don't lead ourselves first? So that's the first thing we've got to deal with. And I believe that the reason we don't lead ourselves first is just that sometimes we're just unaware. We're unaware of the areas in leadership where we need to grow. Like, we don't really know. We think that we're good leaders, and we really don't want to take a good look in the mirror because we don't want to deal with those issues in us that we're like, I just, that those things that make us uncomfortable, or we minimize some of those issues in our leadership. So for example, maybe you've been told that, hey, as a listener, you're not that great. You're great as a speaker, but maybe as a listener, you tend not to listen well, or maybe you're not as organized as you could be, or maybe you just don't pay attention to details. I've heard some of these. These are some of mine and areas that I need to grow in, and maybe you might relate to them as well. Or maybe, sometimes following through with your word, you say you're going to do something, but you don't do it, or, we don't find that you're dependable. These are all some growth areas sometimes that exist in us, or sometimes maybe you just get too angry too quickly. I don't know what those areas are, but there are sometimes areas that are uncomfortable for us to hear. We either are unaware because no one's told us about it, or if they have told us, we just haven't been paying attention. So why is it that we struggle to lead ourselves first? I believe it's because we don't know what we need to lead, like what are the growth areas. And I think that that's so important that we pay attention to those growth areas, because that's how we're going to grow in our leadership. So how do you find those growth areas? To be honest with you, people will say, well, ask for feedback. Go to people and ask for feedback. I have noticed in my own journey with that I go and I ask for feedback. I don't really get feedback the way I want it. And here's what I mean. I might get some superficial feedback, or the person just wasn't ready to give me feedback. They weren't even thinking about anything. So it's hard for them to really give me something that they can give me feedback on. It's not that they haven't seen anything. It's just maybe at the moment where I got them, they didn't know what to say, right? Because at the end of the day, the reality is that we get upset when someone does the action. And many of us, we are very forgiving. After all, if you're watching this video, you're probably a Christian. So hopefully you're a very forgiving person. And people just, maybe they just forget about it. When it happens, they know it. But later on, when you approach them about it, they've forgotten. So asking for feedback, it's not terrible, but I don't think it's the best practice when you're trying to grow your leadership. I think it's better to be paying attention to criticism. So what I mean by that is that anytime some criticism comes up about you, rather than pushing it aside and ignoring it, if you really want to grow as a leader, you need to listen, and we need to listen. We need to say, wait, that is potentially a growth area. And if you want to start working on your leadership now, like leading yourself now, I would recommend maybe you sit down after you're done watching this video and you're done liking it and subscribing it and sharing it with your friends. After you do all that, I would recommend that you get a piece of paper and you think through all the criticisms that you've gotten, and that could be a painful process. Hopefully I'm not taking you down a really terrible path here, but you might want to say, okay, what are the things I've been criticized about in the past? What have people said? And I would say you don't just want to go by what people have said. You want to be sure to get those things that are painful, especially those things that you've heard over and over. In fact, one thing I would say about criticism is that not all criticism is fair. There's some fair criticism, and then there's unfair criticism. How do you know the difference? The difference between the fair and the unfair is that the fair criticism is that stuff that you hear over and over again from a variety of sources. So if multiple people are saying the same thing in different areas, then maybe that's something you need to pay attention. Unfair criticism is maybe something you've heard from someone that doesn't like you or doesn't like your leadership, or just they were just being unfair. And those are some things that are on the periphery. And if you really want to know if some of those criticisms are unfair, I would recommend that you ask some people that really know you best. Some of the people that I've found in my life that know me best, and some of these might be hard, but these are the people you really want to listen to. Your spouse, for one, if you're married. So if you're married, your spouse is consistently telling you something, telling you several things, right? And you're hearing it and you've heard it over and over again. Take note of those things and say, okay, this is a criticism. How can I grow in this criticism? Maybe you're not married. So who do you go to? This one's tough, but you go to your parents and you say, hey, mom, dad, can you give me feedback? They'll have some feedback for you, I'm sure. And after all, your parents, I believe that those are some of the people that love you most in this world and want to see you succeed more than anyone else. So as hard as it might be, go ahead and listen to that criticism. Or maybe you're at a place where you have siblings, and maybe you might want to go to your siblings. What is it that you've heard your siblings say? Not just one, but what have others said as well? And again, this might be painful, but we're going after realities and areas that we can grow in, right? Because if we grow in those minor little details, we'll start seeing we'll start seeing how we're growing as a leader. If you don't have siblings, you have children, go ahead and ask your children. So I would say spouses, parents, siblings, children. If you're near aunts and uncles, go ahead and lean on them as well. But I really would start right there with just those first four if you really want to find your growth areas. Now, certainly you can ask people on your staff. You can certainly ask people in your church, but I found that sometimes those people just aren't as comfortable sharing with you because, it's weird having to tell your pastor or your preacher, having to share with them their weaknesses, right? They're used to you sharing their weaknesses or preaching about their weaknesses, but they're not so used to them sharing with you, pastor, or you, leader, what your weaknesses are. So you want to find those growth areas, find it from the people who love you most, okay? So first you want to become aware of what are those growth areas. You can become aware by speaking to your critics and listening to all the different sources, what they've been saying about you. And then once you have your list, I would recommend that you start with just one thing, right? Maybe you have a list of 10 things, and I would say don't try to tackle all 10 at one time, but maybe grab one and say that top one, I really need to work on this because this one really is hindering my leadership and I really need to grow in this area. So I would say tackle that one and through prayer, ask God, Lord, how can I manage this? Read some books on it, learn as much as you can about that, and then go on to the next and the next. This is growth. So this is not going to happen overnight, and you're not going to be perfect after dealing with that one thing. There's going to be other things that we're constantly dealing with. The last thing that I would say is that you need to not just be a good leader to yourself, but you need to be a good follower to yourself. I find that the problem isn't so much with us leading ourselves. That might be actually not that difficult. And the problem in leadership in general is not leading necessarily. The problem in leadership is having people follow you, having people come and submit to you, right? So that's the hard part. And because you're a leader, you're not used to submission. I'm not used to submission. It's hard sometimes for us. And maybe that's what makes the whole process difficult. But you need to learn to follow yourself. Now, this is something that I know that's true. Just from scripture, I know it's true. Sometimes the problem isn't the leader. Many times, or sometimes the problem is the follower. And when you're trying to lead yourself, maybe the leader part of you is not the problem. Maybe it's the follower part of you. I mean, you can see the story of Jesus and Judas for more context there, right? You can see how Judas wasn't the greatest follower. Jesus, excellent leader, no better leader than Jesus, but Judas just wasn't the greatest follower. And maybe you are your own Judas. So you want to make sure that you are a good follower. So be sure to first identify those growth areas by listening to people, by listening to your critics. Identify what it is that you need to grow in. And then once you start, learning more about how you can be a better listener or better organized or better whatever it is that you need, once you learn how to do that, right, now you become a better follower and you make the decision to submit to yourself. You make the decision to say, I am going to submit to the plan, right? So I'm going to schedule it out and not just schedule it out, because some of us will schedule things out and for some reason we think we've already accomplished it just because we put it on the calendar. No, now it's about submitting to that calendar and saying, no, this is how I'm going to become better at this. So I hope that was helpful. That's how I believe you can start to lead yourself better first. But so I hope you enjoyed that. But listen, if you're probably a preacher, you're probably a teacher if you're watching this, and I want to give you a free resource that I have for you. There's going to be a link here in the description below. It's a free resource for you. It's 12 tips for more engaging sermons. I've got it in an audio and PDF for you so that you can check it out and enjoy that, so that you can have more engaging sermons. So thank you again so much for watching. Hey, if you like this video, what YouTube does is that it refers it to friends of yours that might also like this video. So go ahead and give us a thumbs up if you'd be so kind there, and subscribe to this channel. We're always producing more content to make sure that we are giving you the most practical advice for better ministry. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.